A football opinion from someone who doesn't understand or value the role of tactics or statistics in the game is the same as a political opinion from someone who doesn't understand or value economics. Tactics, statistics, and economics are integral subtopics of football and politics respectively, and so by ignoring them you're missing out on significant value. But how does this relate to Manchester United's potential signing of Bryan Mbeumo? Well, to be honest, I was on the fence about the Mbeumo signing, but after it's been reported that he's demanding £13 million a season, £250,000 a week, and Brentford want between 50 to 60 million, I started to get deja vu from all the previous transfers where United have paid elite level money for players who are pretty good but are about 25 to 50% overpriced. And so I went over to FBref to run what I call a statistical MOT, and unfortunately I have some concerning news. There are already some tactical red flags with this signing, but now I think there are just as many statistical red flags. And so in this video I'm going to break down the tactical and statistical reasons why I think United should be avoiding Bryan Mbeumo, particularly for the sort of money that is being reported. And so in this video I'm going to start off by explaining the tactical issues with the Mbeumo signing, and then show you a stat called non-penalty goals minus non-penalty XG, which is often overlooked or just completely misinterpreted, but is actually going to be key to understanding why I think Mbeumo is being undervalued. But before I carry on with the analysis, if you want to check out any cheap, good quality football jerseys, go over to dragonjersey.com. They sent me over one of their retro shirts, this Manchester United 2006-2007 long sleeved home shirt with Ronaldo 7 on the back, which may be my favourite jersey of all time, with Ronaldo's performance that season making it even more iconic. They've also got other retro and current season jerseys available, and depending on where you live you can get 7 to 12 day delivery time. If you use code Atlantis at checkout you will get a discount for a limited time, so I'll leave it linked in the description and in the comment section below. So a quick disclaimer before I get into the analysis, simply saying he's Premier League proven is not going to be a relevant argument to any of the points I'm going to put forward. If you are upset that I'm criticising a Manchester United transfer, because of course we know they never get them wrong, then at least try to make an argument against the points I'm actually making. So why do I think Manchester United should avoid the signing of Mbeumo? Well, price and salary are the obvious issues, because £50 million plus a salary of £13 million is just far too high. But from a tactical point of view, I just don't see how he's a good fit for that right-sided interior forward role, and to me it seems obvious why. It seems to me like people think Mbeumo is worth a £50 million price tag simply because they've seen he scored 20 goals this season. But if he wasn't on penalties, which he wouldn't be at United with Bruno Fernandes there, and you also factor out his insane XG over performance this season, then really and truly he should be seen more as a 10 to 12 or 13 league goal a season attacker rather than the 20 goal attacker that most people seem to just assume, without accounting for any statistical or tactical issues that he could face in this Manchester United side. But I'll come on to the XG situation with Mbeumo in a bit more detail later on, but first let's go through the tactical issues that I see with this signing. So just think about it logically, what area on the pitch does Mbeumo operate best in? Well, from watching him play, it's pretty obviously the right flank on the outside of the fullback in these wider areas. Now ask yourself, where does Amad operate best in? Exactly the same area. Most of Mbeumo's goals and chances created are coming from when he's driving at the defender, pushing them back into the box, and then cutting inside onto his left foot to release a shot, an in-swinging cross or a reverse pass, which is exactly where the majority of Amad's best pieces of play come as well. If you're using either Amad or Mbeumo on the right side of a front three, surely both players work best when they have a right-footed wing-back behind who can provide over and underlapping runs, looking to receive a reverse pass in behind to then be in a position to put in a cross first time on their stronger right foot, or alternatively to drag the opposition players deep and open up the space on the inside for either Mbeumo or Amad to cut into. Also, considering that both Mbeumo and Amad primarily want to be receiving the ball on the outside of the fullback in these wider areas, surely you then need a wing-back behind who has the ability to drift infield into the half space, or some sort of positional rotation where the wide centre-back or central midfielder pushes forward, allowing Mbeumo or Amad to stay wide in their optimal area. See, Mbeumo and Amad are both right-sided attackers who not only ideally want to be receiving the ball in the same area, but also provide similar qualities in the final third, and I would actually argue that Amad's acceleration, close ball control and trickery actually makes him better offensively in these wider areas compared with Mbeumo. Mbeumo could work as more of an inside forward, taking up narrower positions and not receiving the ball as frequently in wider areas, but that has been a big part of his game. as not only is he a high volume crosser when he's cutting inside onto his left foot, but this is also where the majority of his goals come from. Also, if he was used as an inside forward, I don't see how signing an advanced forward like Gyökeres, who primarily wants to hold a high position on the shoulder of the last defender and make movements in behind the back line, helps Mbeumo at all, as surely he'd work better with more of a false 9 or deeper lying forward such as Xerxes or Voltemada, whose deeper movement would work to drag the centre-backs high and open up the space for Mbeumo to make runs into, allowing him to break through into goal-scoring central positions, usually in 1v1s. For me, the balance is all off with Amad and Gyökeres either side of Mbeumo. If you want Gyökeres, the system needs more of a playmaker from the right, someone who specialises when moving towards the ball and receiving it in tighter areas between the lines. Mbeumo can still do this fairly competently, but it's definitely not the best part of his game, and players like Xavi Simons, Fermin Lopez, Rayan Cherki or Arda Güler are far better suited to this role. Now, people will say that United want Mbeumo because Amorim wants a left footer in that position, but that's kind of irrelevant if the player doesn't fit the actual stylistic profile of what the system needs from the player in that role. Also, does he really need a left footer? I don't really see it being that important if you've got Amad behind at right wing back. In fact, I think Amad would actually work better with a right footer ahead of him, whose over and underlapping movement ahead can provide different crossing angles. Otherwise, you've got Mbeumo and Amad on the right side, both of whom are most effective when they're cutting into the same area on their left foot. There's just not enough chance creating variety on that side for me. Also, Mbeumo isn't the only left-footed right winger either, which renders that point kind of invalid, because there are wide playmakers such as Kang-in Lee who would suit that role a lot more. The main reason I think the majority of people want Mbeumo is because they've looked at the Premier League top goal scorers and seen that he scored 20 goals and thought, well, if he scored 20 for Brentford, imagine how many he'll score for a Champions League level side, which United will hopefully be next season. But this is why simply just looking at who scored the most goals is completely misleading. First of all, he scored 5 penalties last season, so with Bruno Fernandes staying, immediately that's 25% gone and 5 goals less. But 15 goals is still a very impressive output, considering he isn't an out-and-out centre forward, and he is only playing for Brentford. However, this is where the use of non-penalty goals minus non-penalty XG can help us see the picture a bit clearer. So in the whole Premier League this season, the two players who have statistically overperformed their non-penalty XG the most are Mbeumo and Cunha, and in Europe's top 5 leagues combined, they sit second and third. Now in isolation, this isn't a huge concern, but when you look at the fact that Mbeumo's non-penalty XG only ranks in the 42nd percentile in the league this season, and last season, despite ranking a lot higher for his non-penalty XG, he did underperform it by 0.06 per 90, working out at a total of minus 1.4 goals under his non-penalty XG over the course of the whole season, and that's an 8.9 goal swing from one season to the next. And it's easy to see why he's had such a big XG overperformance this season, as a lot of Mbeumo's goals are coming from long-range, low-probability shooting positions, which of course takes a high level of shooting ability, but over the mid to long term, an overperformance of 0.20 goals per 90 and 7.5 goals over the course of a whole season, stemming mainly from these sorts of long-range, low-probability strikes, is never going to be sustainable. And we saw it with Antony. If you take away those long-range strikes when he cuts inside onto his left, dipping from one season to the next, even by a modest 25%, which you'd have to expect, considering Mbeumo's massive overperformance of 7.5 goals this season, is highly likely, then his overall goal scoring output is reduced significantly, and you just can't expect Mbeumo and Cunha to consistently season after season score as many long range efforts as they have this season. And so you can't be signing wide attackers or attacking midfielders solely off their goal scoring output, especially when people aren't even factoring out penalties or the variance between seasons, especially when their non-penalty XG is not consistently hitting similar levels. Now, to be honest, I don't see this being much of an issue with Cunha, simply because he is elite in other areas, such as his ball carrying into open space and he's dribbling in tight areas. And as Cunha's possession section of his FBref reports from the past 2 seasons, in comparison to Mbeumo's show, his progressive passing, chance creating, ball carrying and dribbling output is all significantly higher, and I think the eye test lines up with this assessment as well. If you factor out the 5 or 6 belters that both players have scored this season, and judge Mbeumo and Cunha on what they offer in other phases of play other than goal scoring, Cunha is clearly a level above. Mbeumo in my eyes is on a similar level and a similar stylistic kind of player to Jarrod Bowen, in the sense that they are both capable of having seasons is a lot more dependent on goal scoring. Now, people may say that Mbeumo's massive XG over performance is simply down to his finishing and shooting reaching the elite level this season, but if you look at Isaac and Salah, they only overperformed their non-penalty XG by 1.8 goals this season, and I don't think anyone would suggest that Mbeumo is a better finisher or shooter than those two. And so even if we do assume that he is at the elite level in this area, which after only one season is a fairly big assumption, you'd still have to expect his XG over performance to drop to around 1.5, maybe to 2, and that's being optimistic, which would lead to around 5 to 6 less goals over the course of a full season if his non-penalty XG remained consistent. Now, it is true that his non-penalty XG was significantly lower this season compared to previous, 0.2 per 90 and a total non-penalty XG of 7.5 over the course of the whole season, to last campaign when it was 0.34 per 90 and a total of 7.4, which scaled for the greater amount of games that he played, would see that 0.34 turn into a non-penalty XG of 13, if you were to assume that his non-penalty XG does get back to the level that it was at in 23-24. However, this has been Mbeumo's best season, not just in terms of goals, but probably also in terms of his general performance level, and that has come with Thomas Frank using Mbeumo in wider areas more frequently, with Wissa retaining a central position. And so yes, by using Mbeumo in more central areas, you would imagine this would lead to him getting into higher value goal scoring positions with greater frequency throughout the course of the season, but as a consequence of this, his overall game in terms of his ball progression, link play and chance creation will likely diminish because he's no longer being used in his optimal areas as frequently. Also, last season he scored 9 goals in 25 games, which is a fairly good return, but 3 of those were penalties, meaning that he registered 6 goals from open play. And the season before, in 22-23, he scored 8 non-penalty goals in 38 league games. And so it's not even as if prior to this season Mbeumo was still putting up the sort of goal scoring output that people are beginning to compare to a younger version of Salah. And if we're being honest, Jarrod Bowen's total goal scoring output over the past 4 seasons does look better than Mbeumo's, as even this season, which is Mbeumo's best season, and one where Jarrod Bowen hasn't even been as good as he was in previous years, he's still scoring only slightly less non-penalty goals per 90, with 0.36 to Mbeumo's 0.4, and last season he was scoring at a rate of 0.48 per 90, which is higher than Mbeumo's this season, whilst also having a significantly higher non-penalty XG rate, and so therefore not massively overperforming his XG. Now, I probably would say that Mbeumo's ball progression and chance creation is probably better than Bowen's, but certainly not far too centred around his goal scoring output, which tends to go under the radar at mid-table clubs, but when you're at clubs like Manchester United, where there's significantly more focus on your overall performance week to week, the weaknesses in players' games become a lot more obvious, especially against deeper defensive blocks. And so overall, considering we've got Ahmad already, I just don't see the need for Mbeumo, and even if he did fit the role perfectly, there's no way he's a £50 million player on the same salary as Cunha, let alone the same as Gyökeres. It seems like Manchester United have become so paranoid with signing players who might be flops, that now the fan base and the board are just resorting to picking the best Premier League players available in a given position that season, and hoping that they're able to translate that form regardless of any tactical factors or any statistical variation. But as you can see from Mbeumo's massive non-penalty XG over performance, even if he maintains this level, it's still highly unlikely we see him produce a sort of goal scoring output that we've seen this season. And so my question is, if Mbeumo was guaranteed to only score 10 to 13 Premier League goals next season, or even for the next 3 to 5 seasons, is the rest of his game good enough to warrant being signed for £50 million? Personally, I would say no, but let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And if you do want to check out any cheap, good quality football jerseys, go over to dragonjersey.com. You can use code Atlantis at checkout for a 10% discount, so I'll leave it linked in the description and in the comment section below. Also, if you want to read any of my articles, you can get a 7-day free trial, or you can sign up to my in-game Instagram group chat, so I'll leave that linked on the end screen now as well.